The third episode of Season 3 of The Mandalorian is called The Convert, and it's funny that this is the second lowest rated episode of this season according to IMDb, but it's the one that I actually like so far in this season, so yeah, I have my controversial opinions at times. I'm of course doing these reviews leading up to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. If you haven't seen any of my previous ones, there's a link in the description that covers all of the Mandalorian Season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett as well, and of course the previous 2 episodes of Season 3 of the Mandalorian. If you're interested in that, do check it out. But now let's get into this episode, where I would describe it as an episode of two tales. Because one part of this episode very much just continues the story that the previous 2 episodes were going with. Of course, the story of Din and now Bo as well. But in addition to that, we get a complete side story, which I suppose is a reason that people weren't the biggest fan of it. I do like the side story on Coruscant with Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane. I'm a big fan of that. Of course, I'm going to get into that more when I get to it, because I usually do these reviews in chronological order. So I'm just going to start off with the first part, where Din and Bo are redeemed according to the Mandalorian code. Because they bathed in the waters and now they can actually leave the planet. So they do. The moment that they do, they get chased by some TIE Interceptors. And now, actually watching this back, I realize, wait, that's probably from Gideon's base on Mandalore, which is something that I didn't realize before. So this was actually something that I caught on rewatch that I was aware of. And last week I was complaining about rewatchability of this show, but this is actually something that is actually good on rewatch. So credit to them for actually having that, I think it's pretty cool. And I will say that the chase that they have is pretty good and entertaining. Like, we see, of course, Din being a pretty good pilot, as we knew, with the N1 now, so that's very cool. But also showing Bo's piloting skills, which we didn't know she really had. We haven't really seen that in much of the animated shows either, so it was cool to see that here in live action. But it actually has some consequence, because her castle gets destroyed. And I think that's actually clever writing in terms of having something that the Empire would do in-universe, but also having an out-of-universe reason to make sure that Bo teams up with Din and goes to his group of Mandalorians. So I thought that was pretty good writing, actually. So far, even the main storyline is surprising me, and that's a good thing. But the big thing that I really wanted to talk about with this episode, and the reason that I really like the episode, is the Coruscant storyline. I suppose that people don't like the fact that it's very much a side story and it doesn't really go anywhere after this. Of course, at the very end of the season we come back to it, but initially it was like, why are we going to Coruscant showing Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane? I am all for it. I am very interested in the storyline. I wish that we would have more instead of the fillery bullshit that we're going to get into with the next 3 episodes, and I'll get to it when I get to it, but believe me, I don't have much things to say about the next 3 episodes. But this was a side story that I quite liked, because I actually realized that I liked the character of Dr. Pershing, and even more so Elia Kane. I really think Katie O'Brien steals the show in this episode. She's a good actress. She's playing the role of this manipulative bitch very well. And it's very much a character that you love to hate, because she is despicable. I hate her. And the moment that I first saw this episode, I knew that she was up to no good. But I'm like, okay, I can see why Dr. Pershing fell for her tricks, because, well, she's manipulating him in a very smart way. So I think that actually worked really well, both from an acting perspective from Katie O'Brien, but also the writing. The writing is good for the character. It makes sense. And it's honestly still just a great storyline, I think. And also, just as I said, the fact that we see the New Republic, the core of the New Republic with Coruscant, we haven't seen that really. Of course, we saw a bit of it in Ahsoka later, but Ahsoka came after this. Actually, it was the same year, but a couple of months later. So actually seeing that for the first time, Coruscant, also the introduction of Coruscant is very much the place where Anakin and Palpatine watch Squid Lake, and Palpatine tells the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, one of the most beloved scenes of Revenge of the Sith. So I think that's a very good place to introduce us once again to this beloved planet. And I also really love the fact that this is a very long episode. It's the longest episode of this season. It's actually one of the longest episodes of the entire show. it clocks in at almost an hour, so you get a good portion spent on Coruscant. And yeah, I still don't fully understand the IMDb rating. It gets a 7, which, as I said, is the second lowest rating. I'm like, this is a 9 as far as I'm concerned. I really enjoyed this episode, because it actually shows us a side of the universe that we haven't really seen much in canon at this point. Like, what is living in the New Republic like? It's very different from the Empire, but of course there are still ex-Imperials alive, like a Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane, and they now need to fit into this New Republic, and how are they managing that? And we don't just see them, we see a couple of other people as well, and they talk about like what they kind of missed, the little things from the Empire, and like it gives some character. I really enjoy that part. Like, those little details are good details that I really enjoy, honestly. And like, I very much enjoy Katie O'Brien's performance and the writing of her character, but like, to be more specific about that, there's a moment that she's talking with Dr. Pershing, and she is saying in a very vague manner that she wants to move on. But the way that she says that actually hints that she could still just serve the Empire, because that's what she really wants to. So in a sense, she actually never fully lies to Pershing about any of it. She just says certain words that, you know, makes Pershing assume that she means she wants to serve the New Republic, but not necessarily. What she actually means is that she actually still serves the Empire, as we also now know later in the season that she is still in contact with Moff Gideon about all of this. She's like an insider, and that's very cool. There also is a moment when both of them are looking at the highest mountain peak on Coruscant, when they're like talking about that peak, but in the background you hear the March of the Resistance playing, which is a theme from John Williams that he made for The Force Awakens and was also used in Last Jedi. And it's kind of a variant of it. It's not the exact theme, but it's like a relaxed version that can play as, you know, a background theme. And it's very funny that they actually use music made for the movies in the movies themselves in universe. That's honestly like a nugget that I really enjoy. And that's not the only cue of music that I really enjoy. There's another moment when Dr. Pershing is about to, you know, go rogue and against the New Republic, and we hear a little hint of the same music that they use in the Darth Plagueis scene in Revenge of the Sith. And those are the type of nods that I really enjoy, and I think it's very cleverly used, because it's not as on the nose as some of the references in the show, but like, it's subtle enough for me to pick it up, but also be like, okay, that's cool. There's one thing that does still bug me every time that I watch this episode, and I think it's kind of a nitpick, but it's when they say Tongs Days, am I right? The fact that they made up a name for a specific day is just a weird concept to me. I suppose it makes sense in universe, and it's definitely something that I suppose makes sense, but it still sits a bit weird with me. The same way that, for example, as much as I like The Last Jedi, there are certain phrases, there are certain words in The Last Jedi that they use, like Godspeed Rebels, that I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure if I buy that kind of language. But again, it's a bit of a nitpick. Anyway, of course, in the end, Elia Kane screws over Dr. Pershing right after he has gotten all of his cloning things that he needed. So, of course, we know that she still works for Gideon, but the look on her face when she faces Pershing is like, oh, I hate you so much. But of course, I'm supposed to hate her, so it's very well acted. Again, credit to Katie O'Brien for delivering a performance like that. I really enjoyed that. But the episode then also ends on a high note when Din and Bo catch up with the Mandalorian covert on the planet, and all of the Mandalorians accept them as they are, and you know, it sets up for the storyline that of course will get delayed a lot, but it's something that eventually does pay off. We have to wait a couple of episodes, but I do like the way that the episode starts and ends with them, because at least it reminds you that is the main storyline going on. It's just they didn't do much this episode, so we have to fill it up with something that I thought was interesting with the Coruscant storyline. I do kind of understand that people are against that storyline because it is quite a sidestep from everything else going on, but as I already said, I didn't care much for the storyline in the first 2 episodes, so I was like, you know what, it's nice to see something different as a change. And for the record, we did it. We finally got an episode that I actually do like. I was honestly, after the first 2 episodes, waiting like, am I actually gonna like any episode before episode 7? Yes! It's right here. It's probably the only one outside of episode 7, but it's something, I suppose. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Now I, of course, wonder what you have to say. Do you like this episode at all, or are you one of the people who agrees with the majority where it's like, no, this is one of the weakest of the season? Let me know why you think that in the comments below. Please leave a like on the video if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel for more Star Wars content. And of course, until my next video, may the Force be with you.